Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us in the episode number 2 of the webinar series on strategy for business continuity. Before we start the webinar, I would like to recap some quick hygiene checks for all the participants, which was also displayed on your screen in the waiting room. Point number 1, I would request you all to keep your audio and video off during the webinar to avoid any kind of disturbance during the discussion. Number 2, as we will have 3 rounds of discussion with the panelists, the participants can post their questions to the host anytime in the chat option available on your screen. Hunt Partners will collate all the questions and share with the panelists at the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. Thank you all. I would now like to invite the moderator, Suresh Raina from Hunt Partners, to take it over from here.
Thank you, Simran. Very excited and also a little nervous because I got to hear that we have about the confirmations exceeded 500. So I was chatting with the group here. If at least or even half of you start asking questions, it's going to become very difficult to manage. But thank you very much for making this possible. Simran has already introduced me, so I don't have to say anything more. But we, as you would know, we got started with this webinar series earlier this month. And this is our small contribution towards the crisis that we all find ourselves in. And the effort is how can we, by reaching out to our network, our friends and associates, and get the ideas flowing around, which is going to help us in whatever way possible to come over the crisis today. So today I have the privilege to host the second event for the webinar series, the Leadership Agenda for COVID-19 and Beyond. And as we are talking earlier this week, we have started the next phase of this COVID journey and the relaxation of the lockdown. So I would also pray and wish that all of us are staying healthy, safe, everyone who's here, and friends and colleagues. In the last webinar, which was about 2 weeks back, the theme was cost and optimization. And today, the theme that we have been able to come up with is the strategy for COVID. Surviving the crisis, recovery, and then thriving. And it is not only relevant, but a most interesting theme because business continuity, given the uncertainty that we have, has no historical precedence. Even though I was trying to read up something and figure out can I quote an example from history, but I could not, except for a bit of analogy when somebody was talking about the World War II. We are currently in the 3rd month and it is not showing any sign of abating. And Indians, as we all know, are a little more optimistic and it keeps coming up in every survey that we do. So we have a strong hope and belief that the recovery is not too far. We have been fortunate, and it was the first panel and even today that some of the most outstanding individuals, stalwarts, who are coming and joining the panel. And it's the same that is there today. And we have 4 very illustrious people who I will be introducing. And in this case, we also have one of the panelists joining us from New York. And I was feeling very embarrassed that it's only 5:45 in the morning. And we have had to ask her to not only wake up, but get ready for this discussion so early in the morning. Thank you, Mia. So let me begin with the introductions. I'll start with Mia. Dr. Mia Kuiper is a business builder, a business thinker recognized globally for her pioneering insights into the business impact of AI and digital technology. At Salesforce, she works with the CXOs to transform their companies and adapt to the rapidly changing business environment. She's the economist for the AI research team. Mia also serves as an executive in residence at the Harvard Innovation Labs. She's the chair of the Graduate School Alumni Association and director on board of the Harvard Alumni Association. Previously, she has held global leadership positions at Royal Dutch Shell, PepsiCo, and AT&T. She has also authored the book Profit Power Economics, which was endorsed by Nobel laureate Thomas Schelling, and she has earned her PhD at Harvard in economics with joint degrees at Harvard Business School and Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Thank you very much, Mia, for joining us for this panel today. I would introduce Siraj. Siraj Chaudhary is an industry expert, thought leader, and innovator in the agriculture and food industry. He's a key voice on issues concerning agriculture, food safety, nutrition, and has worked extensively with industry, the social sector, and the government on related projects. Prior to his current role as CEO and MD at NCML, which is an agri supply chain and solutions company, he was the chairman of Cargill India, the very well-known Indian arm of the global multinational, where he pioneered the edible oil fortification as a practice, which got recognized by the Fortune magazine as a change the world activity. Siraj also serves as an independent director on the boards of Tata Consumer Products Limited and Tata Coffee Limited. He is the co-chair of the National Committee on Agriculture and has been the past chair of the National Committee on Food Processing at FICCI and the National Alliance for Edible Oil Fortification, a joint initiative by CII and GAIN to address malnutrition through food fortification. Thank you very much, Siraj, for making it here today. Our next guest is Raj Nair. Raj is a strategy consultant. He's the chairman and founder of Avalon Consulting, Germain AIT Solutions. It's an AI-based technology company, and AGR Knowledge Services, which is a global B2B MR and business services. He's the immediate past president of the IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry. His previous roles include merchant banking at Grindlays Bank and consumer durables marketing. Raj also publishes an annual paper around New Year about what to expect in the course of the year on socio-political and polemic front and their impact on the economies of different countries. And most interestingly, and I got to see the note, this year's annual note was titled The Tipping Point, in anticipation of the huge changes that the world was expected to go through in 2020. He graduated from IIT Mumbai and then an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. He was awarded the Distinguished Alumnus Award and Distinguished Service Award by IIT Mumbai. Welcome, Raj. Thank you very much. And then we have Avinder, who's the CEO for Osram India, with over 2 decades of comprehensive working experience with Siemens in the areas of defense, marine, airport logistics, amongst other sectors. Earlier, he handled the finance function as the CFO before taking the CEO role. He has worked in lighting, telecom, electrical infrastructure projects. He brings to fore experience in M&A and carve-out, has led and successfully managed turnaround of businesses. A business graduate with also a law degree and followed by an AMP from Johnson Graduate School of Management, Cornell University. Welcome, Avinder. Thank you very much for participating in the panel. I feel so humbled in this august company. Really a pleasure to moderate this event. So as we kick off, let me begin with the first theme, which is, so we have three themes. The first theme is, and the three themes are around strategy, as you would have seen from the invite. And the first one is on survival. Current crisis, how can one deal with this crisis? And my first question will be for Avinder. Avinder, there is no historical parallel to this crisis. And all Indian and global organizations are trying to find their way out of this. And one segment that is probably the most at risk is the MSME sector. What would you recommend to the leaders at the helm to handle this crisis as they are faced?
So, thank you, Suresh. Indeed, it's a very august company we are in, and the kind of introduction you have given, that's really nice to know that we have not only local but global experience on the panel. So when you say that the crises are unprecedented, so probably there is no analogy which we can draw from it. So when we do not know when the last the economy or the mankind would have suffered the way we are suffering today, so probably I would say that the solution or the way forward should also not be incremental. It should be an absolutely new way to handle the crisis, because since there wasn't any parallel, so there shouldn't be any incremental way of or a resolution to handle this. So having said that, probably if I come back to your question, which you said that everybody is impacted, every industry is impacted, but the most impacted is our micro, small, medium enterprises in India. So I think let's first understand why are we so much concerned that why should MSME be taken care of? They should be taken care of because of the characteristics or because of the role they play in the Indian economy. MSMEs have been the, I would say, the backbone or the growth engine for India's growth in last 1.5 decades. So that's one reason I would say. They are basically into everything. Be it the manufacturing or the infrastructure or service or food processing, packaging, IT, they're everywhere. Then I think they were created to create some regional balances. More than 20 to 25% of their presence is in the rural areas. Now the numbers are mind-boggling. We have close to 45 to 50 million MSMEs in India. That's only second to China. And the industrial units, what entire India has, close to 90% is in the form of MSMEs. It employs nearly 120 million people, and it is somewhere close to 50%, 45 to 50% of the entire Indian workforce. More than 6,000 products they are manufacturing and producing. The entire India's GDP, nearly 30% comes from MSMEs. The exports we do, nearly 40% comes from MSME. So, and if you see the growth they have maintained is always a double-digit growth since they came into being. So probably over a 1.5 decade, they have maintained nearly 10-11% growth. So with this kind of a characteristic, with this kind of a background, probably it becomes very imperative that why should we be focusing on MSMEs so that they survive the crisis and their survival basically will mean that the turnaround in the economy is quicker and robust. Now, why, when we say that the MSME is doing, that's the kind of contribution they're making to the GDP or the Indian economy or the employment, then we must know that they are pretty fragile and they are very, minimized in their capital, in their resources. And the idea of developing them was that they should be working on the volumes and they should be working on the wafer thin margins so that we can take the maximum advantage of the business conditions. So they don't have deep pockets. They need, regular inflow of not only business but also the money. So with this background, I think now it becomes very clear that we must support them, not for their survival, but I would say the entire economic survival or turnaround would be dependent if these MSMEs survive the crisis. And if you see, that is why clearly something 3 trillion INR is kept as a fiscal benefit, or you can say a stimulus for MSMEs. They may not be direct transfers, but I think people would have much appreciated. I keep speaking to many of the MSMEs for the reason like we are into automotive segment and also in the general lighting. In the general lighting, be it we are driver business or be it we are luminous business or be it we are street light business, 80 to 90% of the work which we do is through MSMEs. So they work pretty closely with us, and we also work. We are also highly dependent on that. So I keep talking to them, and during this crisis also I spoke to them. So probably their concern was that even though 3 trillion looks a big amount, and which comes as a by way of loan guarantees to them, but they would have much appreciated if something as a direct transfer would have given to them to support the employment, what they are generating, to support the employees, what they have, because they are running dry of the cash in these 2.5 months when the production has not happened. So government stimulus did happen, but probably it could have been better if something direct would have also been done for them, either by way of taking care of some percentage of their employee cost or wage cost, or by way of directly handling their interest cost. But nonetheless, that's something which we cannot do, but it is something which they expected and they would have much appreciated, because giving them a loan guarantee would not automatically make them survive the crisis. They actually need immediate cash transfers to do that. Nonetheless, that is something which is on the government side to do it. But I think the least we as businesses who are working with them can do is that we can be a little empathetic in our approach towards them. We can support them as far as possible by way of credits or by way of timely payments and outstandings. What we need to give it to them, we should try and give them some R&D support so that they can make reskilling and transition into the digitized world. Because going forward, we listen in this talk as well that how digitization or digitalization is going to play a real important role. So we must support them to make this transition either by way of technology or way of some credits and all that stuff, so that the reskilling happens quickly. These are the small little things which we must do for MSMEs because they are going to play a crucial role in the transformation, or I would say coming back on track. So if more than this 50 to 60% of the manufacturing which is happening, or trading, or you can say service sector which is happening through MSMEs is taken care of, I think bulk of the economy would come back on track. So that's how I look at it, that this
Thank you.
is very crucial and we need to take care of the sector.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Avinder, for sharing that. Moving quickly to the question number 2, and I would ask Siraj this question. And I know food and agri have relatively been less impacted as we get to here. But how do you see this crisis impacting the business? And what have been the actions that have served well to manage it?
Yeah, it is indeed a setback. I mean, this is not something that we were prepared for, and and currently, when I looked at when I faced this situation, there were essentially three elements that were needed to draw on from a leadership perspective, which was essentially resilience, agility, and optimism. So to start with, when you get a setback, it is really resilience. And for me and my team, it was really what we saw was that at least for the next 6 months, we were going to be facing a disruption. So our business, just to get everyone aware of it, is really we are agri warehousing service providers. We own warehouses, we rent warehouses. This for agri produce largely. We are one of the largest testing and sampling company, inspection and certification for food and agri products. We finance small trade through an NBFC. We have an agri consulting and weather business where we track the weather and predict crops basis combination of weather, satellite information, and on the ground information. So a lot to do with agriculture. As you rightly said, Suresh, this is not a business which is going to go out of fashion, so to say, or going to have a significant change, because food will need to be consumed and agriculture will be there. So for us, what was important was to go over this hump, which was, in our estimation, going to last for about 6 months. The business did slow down. This was a critical period for the farmer because this was the time when they harvested a big crop, and not having access to the field first to actually go and harvest, and then when things were relaxed to go to the field and harvest, but then lack of transportation and the various other services required to get the produce to the market, and the presence or the existence of the market, because the mandis or the market yards were actually closed or were operating with very little staff and people because of social distancing. So like most other businesses, I think our reactions were to immediately work on managing our liquidity, aggressively go after collecting the dues that people owed us, and at the same time look at managing our costs, which wasn't really about, which was, of course, it entails, cutting expenses, but we saw it as an opportunity to right-size our business. Because we were of the firm opinion that the business will be back. There's no doubt about that. And but it provided us with an opportunity to be better prepared to get it back when it does. So if you ask me that where was the time spent, a lot of time was spent, apart from other things, and I'll cover it subsequently, in leadership interactions, essentially to reset the organization, reset the business, so that we are better prepared for what we knew was going to come back. So it was really about being ready for the climb and knowing that once we are done with the climb, there is a great sight after that. Thanks.
Thank you, Siraj. And we are going to pick up the last point that you made about the leadership and getting the organization ready as a theme for our question number 3. But let me first move on to Raj. And as a strategy consultant, what would be your advice to a client, in this case clients, who are caught in this maelstrom, which is unexpected and probably as bad as it could ever get? Sorry, I think you are muted. Yeah, now you can speak.
As I said, compliments for the themes that you've laid out. And yes, this maelstrom is unexpected and it's really, really bad. In India, we're feeling it really badly. My advice would be to, as Arvinder said, throw out your old strategy and rebuild it completely. So you need to have a strategy to hang in there now, that is, survive this immediate crisis, and a different strategy to see how to win when the game changes. We may not get back to where we were in 2019. As I said, the world has tipped. The world was going to tip and the world has tipped now. That said, you also have to throw out your annual operating plan. however meticulously you have prepared it. You need to get both your strategy as well as your annual operating plan in place very, very quickly, because the key determinant of success are two. One is, as Arvind said, reworking everything, because all the assumptions have changed. Okay, so there's no point in trying to make some marginal tweaks. Second is to do it very, very fast. The faster you do it, the better prepared are you to take action. Okay. Now I know it's a tall order, but fortunately, the principles of strategy haven't changed. It still remains how to find a way to achieve your goals or your ambitions with a certain set of resources which you have within the constraints imposed by the environment. Nothing has changed in that sense. Okay, you still have to do the same things, but you have to think differently because the assumptions are different. The second good thing is, and that's good news to all the people who are feeling very depressed, that the factories have not disappeared. The infrastructure has not crashed. The money in the system is all there, but it's lying in different places. It's not exactly where you want it to be.
Right.
And many of the moving parts are started moving. The only problem is that some of the workers you want right now have migrated and not come back. And that's going to be a challenge. But by and large, the biggest thing is that the consumers who consume are not dead. Most of them are alive, and they're going to come back with the hunger to consume. Okay, so that being the case, but assumptions changing, you need to figure out your strategy very, very quickly. Now, in order to help our clients, you asked me what would I tell my clients? What we did is we quickly analyzed 1,563 companies in India, which represent bulk of corporate India, or India Incorporated, to understand three things. The existing capability to avoid getting hurt, how good is the immune system? Their basic financial health and vulnerabilities, to see whether they'll, if attacked, if they are infected by this problem, how will they survive? And third, how much time will it take for them to recover depending on which sector they're in? So using a number of variables, we evaluated these three basic points. And now we have a ready picture of what most of these companies need to take, and also a framework to analyze any company which is not in the 1563. Okay, so we can get off the thing very fast. Now, just to tell you, our analysis shows that only 7% of these companies are in a comfortable position or in a happy position. Happy like Zoom, happy like Netflix, happy like Alt Balaji, or a comfortable position like pharmaceutical companies. Only 7%. There are 61% of the companies which are in trouble, are vulnerable to this pandemic, or vulnerable to the lockdown that has been caused by the pandemic. And the remaining 32% are not vulnerable, but they have to work very hard to not fail. There are generic solutions which all have to take, irrespective of which of the 9 cells where we have, we are strategy consultants. We like 3x3 matrix. So all the companies are in these matrix, and there's some generic solutions, but irrespective of where you are, focus on cash and cash management, which means create a weekly cash budget, do a daily cash monitoring, even if you're the CEO, if not the CFO's job alone, and throw out all this thing about trying to become more profitable during this interim period. Survive, build your cash reserve, because you need all that in order to invest on growth once things change. You don't want a situation where you've emptied your pockets and then say, now the opportunity has come, but I don't have the money and the resources. Okay, so that is definitely the case. That said, there are certain things which certain kinds of companies have to do. Like, for instance, if you're a company which has good cash resilience, you're in a sector which is going to recover reasonably fast, which means less than 2 quarters, and your profitability is decent, then what you should be doing is go after market share. In fact, even acquire to grow without busting a balance sheet. However, if you're a company which has got either a vulnerability on cash resilience, or you're a company which has got low profitability, irrespective of which sector you're in, you better look for new capital quickly. Okay, So there are companies which are doing well. Even the biggest company in India, Reliance, realized that they're highly indebted. They need cash fast. So they got rid of half their debt in the last 1 month. And I won't be surprised if in the next 1 month they will become a debt-free company. But that's exactly what even small companies have to do. If you've got a cash resilience problem or a profitability problem, raise capital. Second thing you need to do is defend your market share. And if required, raise capital right now, not later. However, if you are in the third category, a company in which you have both a cash resilience problem and a profitability problem, you need to not only raise capital, but look for strategic partnerships. Because on your own, you will not be able to fight this problem and come out alive and grow. So we have a problem in this country, especially among the smaller companies. They don't want to dilute. Rethink that concept and say, look, I don't mind diluting. I might work out, or if not dilute, at least have a partnership for a period of 2 years where, all partnerships don't have to be inked for life. Okay? But there are ways to conjure this thing and develop partnerships which will help you to at least weather the next 3 years. Okay? So it's a problem which can be solved, but you should be clear about what your problem is and what the solutions are. That said, I would say that the important thing for us to do, remember, is speed. And as Arvinder said, I keep saying that because it's very important, forget about your old strategy, stop tweaking it, develop a new one. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you very much. I like the cash resilience part. It's coming up very often, and no one could have said it better. And now for Mia, because I'm particularly looking forward to getting your response. Salesforce is a global organization, and I thought we would be very keen to hear how do global organizations like Salesforce, and because you have a vantage position being in the CEO's office, how is Salesforce coping with this crisis, and what actions is the organization taking both at the US level and globally?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much first for inviting me. Indeed, this is August panel and wonderful participants. I'd like to break it down in our actions regarding our employees and our clients. And one of the first things that the company did, which turned out to be extremely helpful and comforting, is to make our employees and our customers aware of the various stages that we are going to have to go through. As you already identified, the shock of having to cope with this virus, then the balancing, and then the move towards restarting. So within our own company, Salesforce, like many of the tech companies, was one of the first ones to start asking everybody to work from home. So within a very short period of time, our 50,000 employees around the world were working from home and having to find a way to be productive, doing so. And one of the aspects that I'll address, because nobody has touched upon it yet, is what the company has done to maintain not just the physical well-being of everybody, but also the mental well-being. And from the CEO on down, there has been a huge emphasis on communicating, on communications with everybody around the world. For instance, there's a weekly all-hands call with our leadership, where tens of thousands of employees are touching base. And many of them have never seen so much of the CEO as they have seen over the past few months. And really be very familiar with what are the stages that the company is going through, and how are they going to be connected. So many steps have been taken to take care of the mental well-being of our employees, which has been extremely, extremely helpful. And it has strengthened our community even further, even though everybody is working remotely. Salesforce also is a company that believes that the business of business is making the world a better place. It's a really high purpose company. So it has really been cooperating and working with a lot of the governments around the world and also around the US. And during the early days of the pandemic, when there were such shortages of equipment, personal equipment for the health workers, shortages of ventilators, shortages of many things one never would have thought there could be shortages of, Salesforce took a lead and delivered plane loads full of such items as a gift to cities like New York, like San Francisco, and to and London, for instance. So those are some of the things we've done to strengthen our community and also to be, continue to be a purposeful company. Then with regard to working with our customers, in the early days, it was helping our customers scramble to continue to function as they went through this big transition of shutdown, of working from home. But then also we pride ourselves of always listening to our customers, because our customers will be on the cutting edge, and having always a 360, as we call it, view of our customers, and helping our customers have a 360 view of their customers and of their supply chain. And listening to our customers, very quickly, they started asking us, how do we then open up again? And the reality is that, until there is a vaccine, not just there is a vaccine, but people around the world can be inoculated. We have to live with this virus for at least another year and a half, 2 years. Experts' opinions vary. So how can companies open up while living with this virus? And as our CEO says, this is our first pandemic. We never knew, we have no roadmap for how to deal with this. So listening to our customers, extremely valuable. And also, we've been developing products that 3 months ago we didn't think we were ever going to be developing. So working with the governors of, for instance, the state of Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New York, California, we've developed a product that we call work.com, which helps companies to deal with getting back to work, but having to do it in a way that keeps everybody safe. So it has features like shift management, wellness tracking of customers, of employees, trace, the famous contact tracing and tracking. So all these features are built into this work.com product that we didn't even know 3 months ago we're going to be developing. So what we're seeing across the board in general is that so many things that seem completely sacrosanct or impossible to change have changed in a matter of weeks. And mostly what we're seeing is that a lot of trends that are already we're already in motion have essentially this virus has put them on steroids. So like one of our earlier panel members was saying, everything is different. You cannot go back to the old normal. It will not come back. And so I think this is just a fantastic new wave, a new world for everybody.
Thank you, Mia. Very interesting. The point I like is true to its word. Salesforce being known as the CRM company, customer is always at the center of everything. Thank you. Before we move to the round 2, which is talking more about the post-COVID era, I would like to also share with you the result of the survey, which we always do along with the webinars. And in this case, also we ran a survey. And as you can see on the screen, this is one of the results. And as you see, it is the question that got asked amongst many, and we are not able to project every one of them, but this was, we thought, most relevant. What is your company's most probable revenue projection for 21-22 financial year compared to the last financial year? And interestingly, we have, as you can see, 60% of last year is 18%, and between 60 to 80%, 26%. and then 80 to 100% is another 39%. Only 17% of the companies are thinking they'll be over and above what they were doing last year. But almost 50% of the companies are somewhere in the range of 20 to 40% of last year. So a significant drop is what everybody is projecting for. Okay, so moving on to round number 2. And our round number 2, the theme is, and I'm looking at my watch, and we are running short of time. We only have about 15 to 20 minutes left. So we'll go quickly with the theme 2 and this round. And this is post-COVID. And the scenario we are looking at is, once the crisis is over, how are you going to get ready for that? And that's what Raj was talking about. So maybe I should start with Raj, because he seeded that thought. While our entire focus currently is on managing the crisis, surviving the crisis, you also said, you talked about cash resilience, and you started already seeding the thought that you have to survive and you have to be ready when the tide turns. So as a leader and as part of the management team, how should we get ready for that?
Yeah, the leader's role is not just to survive, and because a lot of people can do that. The leader's role is to take it to the next higher level, and take it to a level higher than what most people would expect it to be. The preparation but for that you need to have some kind of clarity about what might lie ahead. I'll come back to that soon. But the main point is that one has to get ready with the gunpowder, keep the gunpowder dry right now when you're trying, and also start training the troops for the new battle ahead, because what they did in the past may not be the kind of thing they're going to be doing in the immediate future. And like Mia said, whenever I've experienced this pandemic before, there's no roadmap ready for you to follow. And as you said right in the beginning, you look for examples. There were no examples except World War II. So even to restart the factories, you need a new protocol for restarting the health safety protocol. It's not simple. You know how to do the technological startup for various kinds of equipment. So today people are running helter-skelter, although they started factories. It sounds easy to plan the future, but in reality, it's a huge problem, and there's so much uncertainty. We have uncertainty about the government policy, about the pandemic itself, when it's going to end, and no one knows whether it'll take 2 years or 3 years, God knows, or whether it'll peter out slowly. It's not something that's going to happen in another 6 months. Okay. About the availability of workers, the migrants have gone back. When a factory starts, will they be there? I'm just speaking to a client who supplies to the automotive industry today. He says, I can start my factory, but there are a whole lot of SMEs who supply to our client, the automotive company, and they're not ready to supply. So what will I do with my part supplied to the automotive company? It's a JIT kind of operation. So everything is uncertain. So I would build scenarios, but not at a macro level, like a simple macro level thing like if the pandemic, the lockdown gets over on May 31st or June 30th or July 15th, not that kind, not a simplistic, optimistic, pessimistic, realistic kind of scenario, at a very simplistic level. And I would certainly not try and create too many scenarios because it confuses the troops. I'd probably take 3 scenarios based on a combination of ambition, resources, and the likely business environment. A combination of each of these will form each of the scenarios. And I would put 70% of my resources and effort tuned to the most likely scenario, and I'll keep the 30% to have the flexibility to move to the other 2 scenarios if required. And every week I'll be fine-tuning to be sure that I'm actually aiming at the right scenario. Okay, that's what you can do when you don't have any certainty, and things that can just be like this overnight, because the government policy is government policy. You can't do a thing. I'll keep calibrating till D-Day and then action. The leader and his senior generals need to have the ability to move from one scenario to the other. So I have to keep them totally ready for it. Okay. So that is going to be extremely important. This is the most important thing. That is, plan your scenarios very quickly, create your AOP very quickly. For instance, I'll give you an example. We have created a new system of a new process for setting up, creating a new AOP in just 2 weeks. We just finished doing it in 1 week for a client of ours in Saudi Arabia, a telecom company with 13 subsidiaries, and we had to deal with remotely with 100 managers from Israel. But we could do it in 8 days because they're already a client. We know a lot of things about their business. We can sort of trying to do modeling of what will happen at different price levels for oil. Although these guys are in telecom, a lot of money comes to the government. So we could do a whole lot of things and get a buy-in and bring it in 8 days. Speed is important. You can't take 2 months or 1.5 months to make your AOP, and even less time for creating a strategy. So you have to keep your things ready and have probably 3 scenarios. And I would personally, I may be wrong, but I would keep 70% of my resources and money at one of them, which is most likely, and be prepared to calibrate so that I'm not stuck in the wrong one and then suddenly discover, oh my God. Okay, thank you.
Got it.
I'm keeping it short because you said you're running out of time.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And before moving to Siraj for the next question, I also would like to share with the audience, the participants, in case there are any questions, please do share it with us on the chat. We plan to pick up the questions at the end of the session, which we'll try and wrap up in another 15 minutes. And then we'll pick up the questions, as many as we can, so that we are able to wrap up the entire session by 16:45 latest. Moving on to Siraj, and again, I'm continuing with the theme. What do you think, Siraj, will be the lasting changes? While we said, and I remember me saying that food and agri has not been as impacted, but we are already talking about the social engagements and the restaurants and the food chains and food delivery. And what strategy would you deploy to bring forth the innovation and the new models of business?
So as I said, Suresh, earlier, that there's no threat to business, but the way business will be done, that will change. And some of that has been recognized by the government, because if you notice in the recent package that has been announced, one area which came under significant highlight was the change in some of the laws and reforms in the space of agriculture. So whether it was amendment of some of the very old laws. So essentially, they've changed a couple of laws, or 3 of them actually. And they actually, this crisis has, in a combination of government as well as the farmer and the trade, tried to change practices and policies which were very deep-rooted and had been there for long. So any crisis does provide us that opportunity to make those changes. I think the government has done a good job of getting into some of these areas which were pending for long. And so from our perspective, the change is for the better. But as has been said by earlier speakers, that when there is a change happening, you need to prepare for it. And normally the advantage of the change actually works for the early movers. So so this whole, so while in my earlier conversation, I mentioned about resilience, I see this part of your question really about agility, which is saying that how quickly can we think? And it's not only about what we can think. A lot of organizations, a lot of businesses are actually thinking about how to go about doing their business differently. So it's a lot about conversing with the world outside our organization also. So, I mean, I've had a lot of conversations with people in the government, in the industry, people in the consulting space. And the whole idea is to gather as many ideas as possible, because, and there are some practices, I mean, my business piece we know well. And one of the first things that we did, and we actually did it even before the government announced it, and I'm giving it as an example, purely because we were able to implement a change very quickly. And this is related to the question that you asked about how the models are changing. So typically and traditionally, the Indian farmer brings his produce to a market yard, which is called a mandi, where it is auctioned, and we've had a lot of conversations about how this APMC Act exists and that exploits the farmers. So what we did that in our warehouses, we have a couple of them, we had the permit to have a mandi, a license as they call it. So we actually connected with the commission agents to issue tokens to farmers who could, at an appointed time and date, come to our warehouse, and we could actually, with our in-house services of testing and sampling, test that material, weigh that material, and on our e-market platform, where we actually have a platform where you can auction, could arrange an auction for the farmer. So without even going to the mandi or market yard, the farmer could just come to his nearest warehouse and start trading his produce there itself. And the buyer had the comfort that it was a recognized lab testing the produce to let them know. We could actually videograph the crop and show it to the buyer. And now the government has announced this change also. But so the point is that we had to move very quickly to make a change in how a traditional process was being done. So this phase was really about agility. This was about talking to people, have a scouter hunter mindset for opportunities. And I think a lot of that will get ingrained in how we do business going forward, although the business pretty much remains the same.
Thank you, Siraj. I guess, yeah, one has to lead by example and being innovative. And that brings me to the next question, and I would like to pose it to Mia this time. And I'm going to use the example of the recent news that we have been hearing, and not so good news, where J.C. Penney has announced the bankruptcy, and so has Neiman Marcus and Aldo and a few other stores. But at the same time, we are getting exceptional results from the likes of Walmart, Netflix, Amazon, Walmart is still brick and mortar, but Amazon and Netflix being the online players. So what patterns do you discern amongst the survivors and the winners compared to the ones who have not been so lucky? And how would you suggest the leaders should go about building these scenarios, exactly like what Raj was describing? And how should we approach the strategy?
Yeah, thank you. Well, as also Arvinder and Raj just said, we see a really refreshing attitude, just do it, attitude, and a real drive to have the ability to make fact-based decisions. And what we're seeing is that indeed companies who have tapped into the momentum of the new normal, such as the Netflixes, the Amazons, and those companies that are providing consumer staples have actually done really quite well. But then also we've seen that companies that have been able to move many of their back office information on the cloud, as opposed to having it all on paper and on premise, that those companies have been able to weather the storm really very well. And then with regard to the theme of agility and speed, one of the software companies who's also done very well said that they've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation happening in 2 months. The governor of Rhode Island said that changes she's been pushing for years. She said can happen not just in months. She said can happen in weeks. The CEO of Unilever said that he was very concerned about his employees, about the supply chain, but the amount of innovation that he's seen, he said he wished he could have unleashed it many years ago. The government of New York State has had to deal with millions of unemployment claims in a week, as opposed to a couple of thousand. So again, in a matter of a couple of days, they decided to completely rewrite the protocol. Software companies chipped in, and they hired thousands of people to handle with the phone, something that never ever would have been thought of. They just did it. And things happened very quickly and very successfully. So therefore, what we're seeing is that companies are reassessing what they thought worked, fine, and they're seeing the gaps now. As one famous investor said, when the tide goes out, you see who's wearing bathing suits or not, right? So that's what companies have been seeing, and they found that there are a lot of gaps, particularly in their supply chain. So the theme that I've been seeing a lot is to think ahead and to build greater level of resiliency. And again, that comes from thinking about your business, your environment in a scenario way, really thinking ahead to what potentially could be happening, what's realistically possible that would happen that you never thought of before, and test your strategy against those various scenarios. Are you resilient? Are you actually inadvertently betting the farm? You really only what you're doing only works in one scenario that maybe is not so likely anymore. And so with regard to the theme of resiliency, a lot of companies are relooking their supply chain. They're rethinking about the just-in-time processes, as was mentioned. Is that still feasible? And I think that there's a lot of question about, is this the end of globalization? Are we going to go back to self-reliance, local, etc.? But manufacturers that we've spoken to said, well, that's not quite practical. We don't want to tie up our working capital in excess inventories that become obsolete because the change of technology is so fast. So I think what we're starting to see is companies are trying to build a more resilient supply chain. They really want to have a smarter supply chain where they really can see the production end to end and connect it to the behavior of the customer. So the drive to greater transparency, using technology, using information and fact-based approaches to not get a shorter supply chain, but a smarter supply chain. And therefore, what I'm seeing is that, really with necessity being the mother of invention, I believe this, just like the start of the internet era, this is the beginning of a new era, and there will be a huge explosion of innovation and increased productivity. So we're being sort of shoved forward into a new future, which I think is actually very exciting.
Thank you, Mia. I think it is clear that there is going to be disruption and innovation. Now, moving to Avinda, and I'm going to bring up something that we were talking about, which is the recovery model, because we have discussed so much about the scenarios, and we keep hearing a U, a V, a W, and others. Now, as the experts try and put their finger on what model which we are actually going to see, how should we prepare? We heard it, I think, to some extent from Raj. We heard it from Mia, from Siraj. From your perspective and looking at the industry or industries that you have been tracking, what would you suggest?
So I think when you see the results, be it what Raj showed, that nearly 93% of the companies, or 1563 companies we have surveyed, quite a few things are going to change. And in our own survey, I think nearly 83% of the companies are talking about a revenue loss of 20 to 50%. So one thing is sure, that everything is going to change. When bulk of the companies are talking like that nothing is going to be the way it was pre-COVID session. So I believe we are going to have a new normal. And as some of our colleagues said, that the new normal means that it needs to be very quickly adopted. We need to be very flexible to adopt or change. And I think the new economy would be shaped by new habits, new regulations, new laws, which would basically be based on reduced close contact, which will be based on hygiene restrictions, less travel, virtual mode. That's going to be the biggest change, or the new normal, which is going to happen. So I think you name it and things are going to change, be it the habits, working from home, as Mia said, that the technology is going to be playing a very important role. Work-life balance is going to be disturbed in any case. I think across the globe, everybody feels that if somebody is working from home, probably the timelines are not respected the way they are respected otherwise. E-commerce is going to be on the fore, e-health, chatbots, bots, all those things are going to change. And from an industry perspective, I think there are a few changes which are going to be very prominent, and those are like geopolitics, I believe, is going to change. Very quickly, but very surely, things are moving to nationalism or protectionism. People would definitely look at China plus strategy, which means something beyond China, even though it's not going to be easy. But still, they're going to look at China plus strategy, and in that, I think India has a chance, and we must grab it with both hands. And it's not going to happen tomorrow morning. We really need to change a lot of stuff before we can invite or make people take advantage of our being in the Asia Pacific. Human behavior is going to change. I think things like uncertainty, fear psychosis, immune certifications are going to be the new normal. As Mia said, the supply chain dynamics are going to change fully. I think there are a lot of going to be disruptions, and probably we need to, they might be initially less effective or less efficient, but needs to be more resilient, as we have seen things happening. I also feel that a lot of companies are going from pure manufacturing. They might look at service industry, something like the airline industry. No need to own everything, but you need not give a product. You should give a solution. That's a change which I expect is going to happen. I think technology, Mia already is spoken about. There has to be now, if the technology changes, if the style of working changes, privacy laws needs to be changed. That's something which I expect the changes will happen on the regulation side. I also feel that Raj has already covered this in detail, so I only would say that on the macroeconomics, cash is really going to be the important thing. The cash and the credit management and something to manage your finance is really going to be the key factor, and it will then really means that it gets into the board, and it's not only the responsibility of the CFO, it moves beyond that into the CEO circle as well. And I also believe that a gig economy could be the new norm, where people will slowly but very surely have to understand the transition between an employment contract to an engagement contract. You know, it's not something which we are hardcore used to be an employment contract. And the way things are moving, probably experts are going to work as specialists, and there are going to be a lot of engagement contracts which are happening in other developed countries. These are some of the things which I believe will happen in a changed manner. Route to the market is also going to be changed. It needs to be faster. It needs to be digitized. It needs to be, means many companies will look from, rather than B2B to maybe B2C directly. That's something which I believe is going to change. And before, as you said, the time is running out. Probably the last point I want to make here is that if I see at my automotive industry, which is a major business, I think minimization or value for money is going to play a very important role in the coming days and coming time, which means that the luxury or extravagant is going to take a backseat. People are going to look for value for money. So the good brands, the reliable brands are really going to make a comeback, and the economic sector or the economic value of the products or the vehicles are really going to be an important factor. And that's something which we need to keep in mind, that if it is value for money, then we really need to dig down and be very sensible and very sensitive to the cost structures we are having. So this could be a cost structure for an organization in itself or for the product, but probably we need to keep a very close eye on that. So I think a lot of things are changing. As I said, there'll be very few which will be similar to what it was. It won't be a bad thing to see there's going to be a before Corona and after Corona, BC, and after BC, that is a life after this, which is going to be really different. That's what I believe.
Thank you, Avinder. In interest of the time, I'm going to request for a small change in our plan. Our third theme was uh, this crisis survival and then coming around. And the third theme would have been how does an organization change and reshape itself to make this happen. Luckily, we have received lots of questions. So what we have done instead is I have identified a few questions which are exactly along those lines. So instead of having the round first and then the questions, we are going to just jump directly into the questions, which are around the same theme, if that is okay. And before we do that, I will again ask Simran to show us another slide from the survey, because this again is relevant to what we are talking about. And the question we had posed this time was, what is the key change to your strategy that you think would help you manage this? And the results were again very interesting. We have new business model, technology, and a change in demand planning being the highest amongst the changes. So again, very interesting set of data, and we have a lot more. We should be able to share it with the audience, but for now, I think this was quite relevant to the discussion that we are having. So moving to now the Q&A, and I don't think we'll be able to take all the questions, as I said, but the ones which are relevant to the organization and leadership strategy, I will maybe pick up a few. So the one question that has come up is, and this is for Siraj, and you talked about the government reforms and quite a few revolutionary, we could call, changes in the agriculture. But how would the question is, would government be able to execute these reforms, which are going to face a lot of challenge, which would face a huge challenge from the APMCs, the traders, the entire business chain, the value chain which is built around it. So how should the business take leadership and take the opportunity to make it through?
You're right. I mean, but this is not for the government to really implement. This is now for the business to, the government has kind of removed certain barriers, and now it is for the business to, move into that space or go past those, go into the spaces which were earlier not allowed. And that will take time. It will involve building confidence with the farmers, because the farmer commission agent or the farmer APMC relationship is also a very old relationship. And it's not just about, the farmer coming and selling his goods. I mean, he's taking loans from the same people, and they're kind of his eyes and ears to the markets. So the business, or the organized business rather, will have to step into that space, build confidence with the farmer, build confidence with the trade. It is, and that's what I meant when I said that the way the business is going to be done will be different. So over a period of time, we will need to, carry that change through. And that would require a lot of handholding, a lot of trust building, and demonstrated action, which suggests that whatever we are doing or bringing out is better than what was there in the past, purely from facilitating how business is done and taking certain costs out of the supply chain.
Got it. Thank you. Mia, we have a question, and again, it has been directed to you. And the question is, how will we predict how the consumer behavior is going to change?
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting question. And what we're seeing is that, like I said, trends that were in the works already for such a long time, they're actually now being manifested. And what we are finding is that consumer behavior, which had been trending towards not just buying a product for its features, but also very much wanting to be having an experience surrounding that has become extremely, extremely important. And we see that is actually just being accentuated by this development, by this move. So it's just not enough to have features, but also to have the experience that come with it. Also now with so many consumers being online all the time, shopping online, we see a huge move that's likely to stick. Like one of the reasons, for instance, Walmart has done so well is that so much of their volume over the last few months has essentially been via their online, their online shopping capabilities. So that is also likely going to stick. And also what we're seeing is that since so many consumers are actually now influenced by other behaviors, looking at other consumers and doing online, other opinions, what we're seeing is that trends that are already in the works, that opinions about a company, opinions about a brand, opinions about features are almost as important as the actual features itself. So having to tap into that becomes very important for companies, being able to read consumer behavior and not just offering the best products, the best price, but also tapping into the consumer behavior is very important. And that's one of the things that I've been writing about and researching about, is that you can almost like throw out the old textbooks about demand and supply. It just doesn't apply anymore. Like tapping into the dynamics of consumer behavior and being able to read that is becoming extremely important.
Noted. Thank you, Mia. Raj, a question is coming your way. And the question is, organizations will restructure. They don't have a choice. And there's going to be many changes. But how should leaders find the right way to make these changes? What guiding principles should they keep in mind?
Okay, I've unmuted myself. The most important thing, assumption I'm making here, is that the company or the organization knows what changes it wants to make. When I talk to many of my clients with whom we are now working on redeveloping their strategy and changing their plans, they say, can you help us to make the change happen? Because there's always been a resistance. People don't want to change. And how do I make this change happen? So I'll cut a long story short in the interest of time and just talk of two aspects. One is leading from the front. You have to, if you want the organization to take a 20% salary cut or 30% salary cut because the organization cannot survive, then you have to first show that you're taking a bigger cut, much bigger cut, before you have the right to talk. So you have to lead the way. On every single aspect of change, you show how you can lead the way. You cannot be like some political leaders who will tell you to take all the health precautions and not wear a mask. It happens in India, it happens in the US. Okay, let's not go for names, but then they can get away with nonsense. But as a leader of an organization, you have to be clear that you have to lead from the front through example, through action, and not through words. Otherwise, no one is going to do any change. The second thing is, and this is very more important, as someone said, you have to communicate, over-communicate if required, but don't under-communicate. I would nuance that by saying that, yes, you have to communicate, no question about it, and we often under-communicate. But more than quantity, it's the quality of communication. Now, there are people who are much wiser than I who have done research on figuring out how best to communicate. And you already disclosed that I'm basically an engineer by training. We engineers are so straitjacketed. The way we would communicate normally is, this is what we're going to do. 30% pay cut, there's no choice at all. The company would have been in deep trouble, is in deep trouble, and the problem is not caused by us, it's caused by the pandemic and the government lockdown. So 30% cut. And this is how we're going to enforce it and implement it. And then maybe after 6 months, we'll review it and then look at it. And then we'll say, why are we doing it? Because if we do it, we can save the company. And by the end of the trouble period, we will be able to come out. So it is, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And why? apparently there's research, and we have done it over the last 3 years to change the way of communicating. The reverse works. The most intelligent and most followed change agents always communicate why first, then how, and then what later. Exactly the opposite of what 99% of the people do. So if you want to get companies, employees in the company to agree to a change, let's say, for example, the salary cut, since I talked about it, you first talk about how the company is going to be in trouble. Their revenues are expected to drop by 40%. And we have to, if we continue the way we are with all our expenses the way they are, then by the time the pandemic is over, the lockout's over, and we're ready to rise, we'll be bankrupt. And when the opportunity is staring at us, we won't be able to do anything. All of you lose a job, including me. On the other hand, we have two choices. Either we cut our revenue by our expenses by about 30% across the board, including salary, or we could even say, let 30% of our colleagues go away. Wish them they don't exist. And the 70% of us can have a full salary. What would you like? Wouldn't it be nice to have all the people together and we fight the battle again tomorrow together? And you only have the emotional part taken care of. Then you explain how, and then say, what are we going to do? We're going to do it this way, that way. You suddenly find the same communication content has been bought by people and say, yeah, we can't let our colleagues go. We all have families. Let's be all together in this game. We all take a cut. And then when the 6 months are over, we will probably be still left with cash, and we'll have all the energy, and we'll all be together to win. So there are ways to manage change. And I'm just giving you two examples for lack of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. There is a whole host of questions which are lying with me, but unfortunately, we are already overshot the time. There are a bunch of questions for you, Avinder, but I thought I'll just focus on the leadership and the organization piece for now. So let me take a minute to conclude. I don't think we could have found a better panel. And the theme that we had got for today was strategy for both the survival and the renewal. The rich experience of the panelists and both local and the global perspectives that we got. And some of the strategic insights and recommendations that have been placed on the table, I'm sure there were lessons that all of us can use as we go back to our firms and organizations. And I hope it was as enriching and as stimulating for everybody in the audience. I know we had a lot of people who dialed in, and I'm sure they will also take immense benefit from their participation. I also have to take 1 minute for Hunt Partners, because that is a mandate that I have, which is about the firm and what we have been doing in the last 2 months, because we have a lot more time on our hands than before. So what we have been busy with is trying to be useful and relevant to our clients and to our friends in whatever little way possible. And this is one of the activities, which is our leadership series through webinars. And then we have the other host of activities which are running in parallel. So trying to do our best in our contribution to this COVID challenge. So I would like to remind everybody, I'm sure you would have received the note that the next webinar is going to be on the 5th of June, Friday again at around the same time. And the theme is, I don't have the theme, I think it's still getting finalized. And it's going to be another very interesting and stimulating session. I would like to take once again the opportunity to thank everyone on the panel for making the time, sharing your thoughts, giving us the insights. Very useful. Thank you. Thank you so much on behalf of Hunt Partners and everybody in the audience today. Thank you. Bye-bye.